Hey guys, tonight we slip into a country where the lights glow red, the laws are surprising, and the streets whisper stories older than most fairy tales. You walk through cobbled alleys in Hamburg's St. Pauli district, the Reeperbahn pulsing like a heartbeat after dark. Behind glass windows, women pose under glowing tubes of light, some smiling, some distant, most wrapped in silence. You might think you've stepped into some unregulated Wild West of desire, but here's your first surprise. Prostitution in Germany? Totally legal. But yes, there's always a but. The rules are complex. Think more German bureaucracy than bohemian fantasy. Since 2002, sex work has been decriminalized and officially recognized as labor, with workers entitled to health insurance and pensions, on paper at least. That's where your naive assumptions start to unravel. It's like being told jaywalking is legal, but only if you fill out Form B-17 and notify your local jaywalking supervisor in triplicate. Historians still argue whether this legalization was truly liberating or just a new form of containment. Some say it elevated safety. Others call it window dressing for deeper problems. And just when you're adjusting to that paradox, here's your first quirky fact. In one German town, the city briefly installed sex drive-through booths, modeled after car washes. Pull in, curtains close, transaction happens. Like ordering a Big Mac, but with more eye contact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with your city and what time it is where you're listening. I love knowing who's tuning in from where. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle a little deeper into the story and meet a tongue twister of a law. Prostitution shoots Jesus. Try saying that 3 times fast, or even once without feeling like your mouth needs a passport. This Prostitute Protection Act came into effect in 2017 and is Germany's attempt to regulate sex work with a clipboard, a signature, and an impressively thick file folder. Under this law, anyone offering sexual services has to register with the local health authority, attend mandatory counseling sessions, and carry a special ID card. Yes, a real sex work license with their pseudonym and expiry date. Sounds empowering on the surface, but you quickly notice the friction. Some workers feel safer. Others say it's invasive, almost Orwellian. One Berlin-based advocate calls it legal stigma in a laminated wrapper. Historians still argue whether the law reflects protection or subtle persecution. Is it shielding workers from harm, or branding them in a way no other profession endures? Meanwhile, here's your quirky tidbit for tonight. During the first year of the law's rollout, several German cities ran out of trained staff to handle the influx of registrations. So the waiting list to legally become a sex worker could stretch months. Imagine telling your landlord, "Rent's late. I'm waiting for my bureaucracy to catch up with my hustle." You pass a faded flyer for an information session. It's held once a week in a government office sandwiched between a driving school and a kebab shop. There's coffee, pamphlets, and a strange mix of helpful warmth and cold documentation. The woman at the counter gives you a form. No one looks anyone in the eye. So yeah, it's legal. But if you want to do it right, you'd better bring a pen. You're easing into the rhythm now, the way the city shifts gears after dusk. Neon signs buzz softly above narrow streets, and your footsteps echo off pavement that's seen more secrets than history books ever bother to tell. You glance left, and there it is, a row of lit-up windows, each one like a vending machine of human connection, minus the buttons. Welcome to Germany's red light districts, where variety isn't just a selling point, it's a civic feature. You step past the windows and into a different world entirely. The infamous FKK clubs. Freikörperkultur, free body culture. Part health spa, part adult playground. You trade your clothes for a towel, which no one ends up using, and find yourself among business suits, tourists, and people who act like they're just here for the buffet, which, by the way, is surprisingly good. Chicken skewers, pasta salad, and a quiet feeling that this is the weirdest IKEA lounge you've ever wandered into. Red light windows are mostly legal in places like Cologne and Hamburg, but every German state sets its own tone. Some allow window prostitution, others ban it outright. The FKK scene thrives on ambiguity. Is it a wellness center or a brothel with a steam room? Historians still argue whether these clubs are a modern expression of liberalism or just capitalism with towels. You keep walking, lulled by the hum of streetcars and the steady glow of late-night traffic, when something unexpected trips you up: paperwork. You assumed this was a cash-and-go kind of situation. But in Germany, even intimacy comes with documentation. Technically, clients, yes, that includes you, are expected to check whether the sex worker is registered under the Prostitution. No ID? No go. At least, that's the official rule. Here's the thing, almost nobody does it. In practice, the law's client-side expectations get filed under things the authorities don't really enforce unless they absolutely have to. But they're there, inked in legislation like a rulebook for a board game no one finishes reading. You walk into a mid-tier brothel in Frankfurt, clean and strangely quiet. A polite receptionist gestures to a menu, like you're about to order sushi. The room's dim, perfumed, and wallpapered with silence. No one talks about ID cards. No one asks about legal compliance. There's a silent mutual understanding that the rules are a kind of shared illusion, like speed limits in the countryside. Still, you remember reading somewhere, if a client knowingly hires an unregistered sex worker, there's a fine of up to 1,000 euros. Historians still argue whether this aspect of the law is about protecting workers or intimidating buyers into overcaution. And here's your fringe fact of the night. Some sex workers have started carrying custom QR codes. Not mandated by the law, just practical. A quick scan links to their official registration and safety contacts. It's modern, weirdly efficient, and also deeply dystopian. You leave the building a little more informed, but slightly disoriented. There's something about bureaucracy wrapped around pleasure that makes the whole thing feel like you're filing taxes, but with more nudity. You drift into Cologne, where the cathedral towers over the city like a stone sermon, and just a few blocks away you find something equally rigid: Germany's oddest tax policy. Here, prostitution isn't just legal, it's taxable. And in Cologne, it's taxed down to the square meter. No, really. They call it the sex tax, or more formally, the Vergnügungssteuer, the amusement tax. Sounds harmless enough until you realize that it charges brothels and sex workers not by income, but by physical space. It's like the government walked into a room, squinted, and said, "This feels like €7.50 per square meter. It's a flat monthly rate due whether you earn money or not." Historians still argue whether this is pragmatic policy or state-sponsored micromanagement of intimacy. You walk past the Pacha megabrothel, a 12-story monument to the commercial side of desire. Here, each floor has a theme, and yes, it looks suspiciously like a very adult hotel. The building even has its own dedicated tax office liaison. There's paperwork for everything: hours, staff lists, even security rotas. It's less 50 Shades of Grey and more Excel spreadsheet of beige. And here's your quirky nugget. For a brief time, Cologne installed a tax meter for street-based sex work, a discrete ticket machine like a parking meter. Sex workers paid nightly fees and displayed a small receipt in their purse or shoe. Imagine that transactional intimacy with a printed receipt. Press button, insert coins, validate your night. But don't roll your eyes too hard. Some workers say this tax gave them a sliver of legitimacy. Others argue it forced the poorest into even shadier corners, just to avoid the fees. You keep walking past the tax meter, now out of use, and wonder what else in this country gets a bill stamped on it. Love? Maybe. At the very least, square footage. Now you're in the outskirts of Leipzig, a little off the tourist track, where the lighting dims and the German gets softer, more accented. Here, something unspoken starts to surface. The quiet, complicated presence of migrant sex workers. You thought this was a German affair. But most of the women, and yes, it's mostly women you've seen, aren't German at all. Romanian, Bulgarian, Hungarian, Polish voices from across Eastern Europe fill the industry. Some came willingly, seeking better pay. Others followed promises that unraveled fast. The border may be open, but the stories that cross it are often closed until it's too late. Historians still argue whether this influx was a result of freedom or economic coercion by another name. In a Stuttgart cafe, you overhear two women switching between Romanian and German, laughing quietly over coffee. You want to believe things are okay. And for some, they are. But dig a little deeper and the shadows stretch long. Migrant workers often lack social safety nets. Some aren't registered, meaning they can't access healthcare, pensions, or legal protections. Others are technically legal but still pressured by third parties, boyfriends, cousins, helpers who blur into pimps. And here's tonight's fringe fact. Some German NGOs have developed emergency cards, laminated sheets with pictograms explaining basic rights, in over 15 languages. Because too many workers enter this country without knowing what legal actually looks like here. It's not all darkness. Advocacy groups work tirelessly. Clinics offer help without asking for ID. But still, there's that tension in the air. A sense that legality and reality are playing different games with different rules and someone always loses. You keep walking, wondering how something so visible can stay so hidden. Germany may have legalized prostitution, but not even the law can translate every cry for help. You slow your steps now, the night folding inward, and begin to notice something harder to define. It's not the red lights or the paperwork. It's what happens in the space between a contract and a choice. In Germany, the act may be legal, the rooms may be clean, but consent here isn't always as clear as you think. You meet a woman named Lena, probably not her real name, who tells you she works independently. She's registered, pays taxes, even runs her own website. On paper, she's empowered. But ask her about her clients and her voice tightens. Sometimes they think they bought the whole person, she mutters. That's the gray area where legality ends and human behavior begins. Historians still argue whether Germany's legalization model truly centers consent or just professionalizes its neglect. Sure, workers can say no. But when rent's due, saying no gets complicated, especially when clients feel entitled by receipt. Some NGOs are pushing for tighter definitions of coercion. They want clearer distinctions between willing, pressured, and out of options. Meanwhile, advocates of full decriminalization warn. Blur that line too much and you'll criminalize survival. Here's tonight's quirky aside. One Berlin university offers a seminar on sex work and consent ethics, taught not by a philosopher, but by a former dominatrix with a sociology degree. The class is half theory, half reality check. You sit for a moment at the edge of a train platform. Somewhere behind you, laughter echoes from a club. In front, a man nervously lights a cigarette and paces. You start to realize that Germany's red light world isn't just a place. It's a reflection of choices made, laws written, and the vast space in between where people live. Consent here isn't a checkbox. It's a negotiation, sometimes spoken, sometimes swallowed. You follow the rails into Stuttgart, a city of engineering marvels and complicated rules, and here you finally stumble into the odd reality of Sperrbezirk. That's German for prostitution restricted zones, a patchwork of urban planning and moral panic. You cross the street and suddenly, without signs or warning, the act becomes illegal. Not because of what you're doing, but where you're standing. Here, prostitution is banned within a certain distance of schools, churches, and public parks. But unlike a bright line on a map, these zones twist and shift. One corner's fair game. 2 blocks down, it's a crime. You walk past a kiosk where a woman is offering services behind tinted glass, and she gestures nervously. "No police tonight," she says. The next block? A €5,000 fine and a court date. Historians still argue whether these zones protect the public or just push sex work further into shadows. The boundaries don't reduce demand, they just force supply to play hide and seek. A classic case of urban invisibility. And the quirky detail for this evening. In 2010, Stuttgart police briefly used heat mapping software, designed for crowd control at football matches, to monitor areas of suspected illegal sex work. The irony? They caught more jaywalkers than clients. You stop at a street corner where 3 zones collide. Legal on one side, restricted on another, and completely banned after dark across the way. A map wouldn't help. Most locals don't even know where the borders are. But sex workers? They learn quickly. Fines hurt more than bad clients. You step back uneasy. The lines Germany draws around this trade aren't always about health or safety. Sometimes they're about visibility, what the public wants to pretend doesn't exist. But the work keeps moving, shifting like fog around the city's edges, always finding the space between silence and survival. You head north now, back toward Berlin, where protest signs flap like tired flags on a chilly afternoon. A small crowd has gathered outside the Bundestag. Some carry posters calling for abolition. Others wear shirts that say, "Sex work equals work." You realize quickly this is no quiet consensus. Germany's sex laws are standing on a fault line, and it's starting to rumble. At the heart of the debate, the Nordic model. Originally pioneered in Sweden, it criminalizes the buying of sex, but not the selling. It's like saying, you can dance, but whoever hires the band goes to jail. Supporters argue it protects vulnerable women by targeting demand. Critics say it just drives the whole trade deeper underground. Historians still argue whether the model reduces trafficking or simply rebrands repression with better optics. Sweden claims success, but Germany isn't buying the numbers or the philosophy. Here, many sex workers themselves oppose the shift. Don't save us by making us poorer. One sign reads, tonight's curious detail. In 2021, a parliamentary petition to adopt the Nordic model was signed by a coalition of faith groups, feminist organizations, and, wait for it, a well-known German crime novelist. Apparently, nothing unites Germans like fictional murders and real-life legislation. The Berlin protest isn't massive, maybe 50 people, but the tension is palpable. Police hover nearby, pretending not to listen. A woman named Amina speaks into a megaphone. If I can't choose this work, how is it freedom? Germany, for now, stays with its regulation model. But the Nordic whisper is growing louder, slipping into courtrooms and campaign platforms. You sip your coffee, suddenly aware that the next election could redraw the rules. Again. In this country, laws don't stay still. They shift, swell, clash. And if you're not paying attention, they rewrite the script before you've even memorized your lines. You end your night not in a club, or a back alley, or even near the glow of red windows, but at a corner bakery that opens at 4 a.m. A few early risers sip coffee, and outside, the city exhales. You watch as a woman, maybe in her 40s, heels in one hand, scarf tucked tight, steps out of a nearby building and disappears into the early mist. No drama. No neon. Just a quiet ending to another anonymous transaction. This, perhaps, is what no one tells the tourists. Beyond the guidebooks and documentaries, beyond the liberal paradise label or the moral outrage headlines, Germany's sex industry runs on silence, on codes and unspoken routines, on knowing where to walk and where not to look. You recall a story someone told you earlier in the night, that in the early 1900s, Berlin's brothels gave out stamp tokens, like casino chips for services. Now, the currency is discretion. Clients text in code. Workers use aliases. The digital age has added efficiency, but also new layers of invisibility. Historians still argue whether this modern secrecy is self-protection, or just a polished version of the old shame. Tonight's oddity? In Munich, a researcher once mapped brothel locations alongside kebab stands and laundromats, concluding that sex work, in spatial terms, mirrors everyday life. Tucked between chores, folded into routine. You finish your pastry as the sun edges up. Behind you, the city prepares for another day of rules and contradictions, of safety meetings and secret phone numbers, of legal frameworks wrapped around unspoken truths. And here's what they won't write on the tourism posters. The real story of sex work in Germany isn't told in laws or taxes. It's told in quiet glances, quick exits, and the things that people, on all sides, choose not to say. Now let's ease back. So now, take a slow breath and let the quiet sink in. The streets are emptying. The questions have softened, and whatever was neon lit just hours ago is now dissolving into morning haze. You're still here, listening, wondering, maybe a little changed, maybe just a little more awake. Let the weight of what you've heard melt into the background, like the hum of distant trains or the shuffle of early footsteps on stone. These stories, so full of paradox and tension, aren't here to keep you up. They're here to drift through you, To leave behind not answers but echoes. Maybe tonight's journey was unexpected. Maybe it left you with questions. But that's okay. Let the contradictions blur like streetlights in the rain. Let the debates fade like soft footsteps down a quiet hallway. Let the city fall back into silence. You're safe now. Eyes heavy. Thoughts floating. And if your dreams take you somewhere strange tonight, well, don't worry. You probably won't survive the bureaucracy either.